Are you having a good summer so far?
Yes, so many penises.
But if one person could walk into every interview, every award show, every red carpet moment, and completely break the rhythm of it without ever raising their voice, not through chaos, not through drama, but through something far more unsettling, silence, timing, and perfectly placed unpredictability. Because in Hollywood, most stars are trained to follow the script. But then there is Aubrey Plaza, a performer who doesn't just deliver lines, she bends the entire atmosphere around her. One moment everything feels normal, and the next, the room is laughing, confused, or completely unsure whether what just happened was a joke, a mistake, or something in between. And that's exactly why you can't look away. If Hollywood is designed to turn personalities into predictable patterns, then Aubrey Plaza stands firmly outside that system. Her screen presence has often been described as controlled unpredictability, an ability to shift the energy of a scene with something as small as a pause, a flat delivery, or a glance that feels intentionally unfinished. Instead of performing in a traditionally expressive way, she often leans into restraint, which paradoxically makes her performances feel more intense and difficult to anticipate. Born in Wilmington, Delaware in 1984, Plaza built her foundation in comedy through improvisation and sketch performance before transitioning into television and film. She trained at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York, a well-known hub for modern American improvisational comedy, where many performers learn timing, silence, and reactive humor as core tools. That background became a defining part of her acting identity, less about scripted expression and more about controlled spontaneity that feels slightly off-center, even in structured settings. Her breakthrough came with the role of April Ludgate in Parks and Recreation, where she turned minimal expression into a signature style. What could have been a simple deadpan character instead became a cultural reference point, largely because she refused to overplay emotion. The character's flat delivery and subtle sarcasm made her stand out in a cast known for high-energy comedy, and it established Plaza as an actress capable of making silence feel like dialogue on its own. Over time, her public persona became a mixture of performance style and audience interpretation. Because she often maintains a calm or neutral expression in interviews, audiences sometimes project unpredictability onto her behavior, even when she is simply responding in a measured or ironic tone. This has led to online myths and exaggerated stories that circulate without clear verification. One such example includes recurring internet claims about unusual incidents or exaggerated backstage behavior, though many of these stories are unsubstantiated and tend to grow through repetition rather than confirmed reporting. In reality, most verified accounts of her career show a consistent pattern of professionalism paired with unconventional humor rather than disruption. What is more concrete is her growing recognition across both comedy and dramatic acting. In recent years, she has expanded beyond comedic roles into critically acclaimed dramatic performances, including her widely discussed role in The White Lotus Season 2, which earned her nominations from major award bodies such as the Emmy Awards and Golden Globe Awards. This shift demonstrated her range beyond deadpan comedy, showing an ability to carry emotional weight while still maintaining her distinctive understated style. Her interviews often reflect the same controlled unpredictability seen in her performances. Instead of following standard promotional rhythms, she sometimes responds with dry humor, abrupt tonal shifts, or unexpected honesty that disrupts the usual flow of celebrity conversation. This is less about chaos and more about timing, an instinct for withholding predictable reactions, which often leaves interviewers momentarily off balance. Ultimately, what defines Aubrey Plaza is not the myths that circulate around her, but the consistent artistic identity she has built over years of work, a performer who uses restraint as expression, silence as timing, and understatement as impact. In an industry driven by polished predictability, she remains one of the few figures whose presence feels intentionally unpolished, yet precisely controlled. When discussing her early experiences working in public-facing roles and comedic environments, Aubrey Plaza has often leaned into a very specific kind of humor, one rooted in improvisation and intentional distortion of reality for comedic effect. With a background in improv training at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, she developed a performance style where truth and fabrication can blend seamlessly as part of character work. In improvisational comedy, this technique is common. Performers intentionally create fictional details in real time to maintain narrative flow. Heighten humor or destabilize audience expectations. Plaza has frequently referenced this approach when reflecting on her own comedic instincts, framing, lying, not as deception in a literal sense, but as an accepted tool of performance and character building. This perspective is important because it aligns with a broader tradition in modern comedy, where performers blur the boundary between authenticity and performance. In interviews, she has described how committing fully to an invented detail, even in casual conversation, can heighten the comedic impact of a moment. This is consistent with established improv principles, where consistency within a fictional framework is often more important than factual accuracy. As a result, when she speaks in a tongue-in-cheek or exaggerated way, audiences familiar with her style often interpret it as part of her comedic persona rather than literal truth. In one widely discussed anecdotal setting, conversations around her past public interactions and tour have been framed in an exaggerated or playful manner, contributing to a kind of myth-making around her personality. These stories often circulate in entertainment spaces where humor, exaggeration, and real events blend together. In structured terms, this reflects a broader phenomenon seen with many public figures. Repeated comedic retellings can gradually reshape audience perception, even when the original statements were delivered in jest or within a performance context. Another recurring theme in her public appearances is the way surreal or unusual props, jokes, or staged moments are introduced into conversations without traditional explanation. In televised interviews and live appearances, especially within comedy formats, guests are sometimes given unexpected items or placed in absurd scenarios designed to provoke spontaneous reactions. When Plaza participates in such moments, she typically does not break the tone to clarify or rationalize what is happening. Instead, she maintains a steady, understated reaction style, which amplifies the absurdity of the situation. This technique is closely tied to a well-documented comedic strategy known as deadpan escalation, where a performer treats increasingly strange situations with calm normality. The effect is psychological. The audience becomes more engaged because the lack of emotional correction forces them to interpret the humor themselves. Studies in comedy performance analysis often note that deadpan delivery can increase perceived humor intensity because it shifts cognitive processing from emotional reaction to interpretation. As a result, in group settings, whether talk shows, panel discussions, or promotional appearances, her presence often changes the rhythm of interaction. Other participants may react more strongly or visibly, while she maintains a minimal response style. This contrast creates a layered dynamic in which the humor is not only in what is said, but in how others respond to the absence of conventional reactions. What emerges from these patterns is not randomness, but a consistent performance methodology. Her approach relies on controlled ambiguity, offering just enough information or withholding enough explanation that the audience and participants are left in a state of interpretive uncertainty. In comedy theory, this aligns with incongruity-based humor, where the gap between expectation and response creates comedic effect. So when her remarks are described as confusing, surreal, or reality-bending, it is often less about literal unpredictability and more about a deliberate performance style rooted in improvisation, timing, and restraint. When discussing her public identity and online presence, Aubrey Plaza tends to approach the topic in a deliberately minimal and understated way. Rather than offering detailed explanations about branding or digital persona, something many modern celebrities carefully construct, she often responds in a simple, almost indifferent manner, suggesting she chooses things like usernames or online handles based on personal preference rather than strategy. This aligns with a broader pattern in her public communication style, reducing traditionally important celebrity topics into casual, almost dismissive remarks. In the broader context of celebrity social media behavior, this is relatively uncommon. Studies of entertainment industry branding show that a significant majority of actors and public figures actively curate their digital identity to maintain consistency across platforms, often working with management teams or social media strategists. Plaza's approach, however, appears less structured and more instinctive, which contributes to the perception that her online persona is intentionally unconventional or unfiltered, even when it may simply reflect a low-priority attitude toward digital self-presentation. In interviews, when journalists attempt to explore these personal branding choices further, she often redirects the conversation with humor or brief answers that do not fully expand on the question. This conversational pattern creates what communication analysts sometimes describe as intentional ambiguity, a style where responses are complete enough to be technically satisfying, but open-ended enough to resist deeper framing. As a result, interviewers frequently find themselves filling the gaps themselves, which can lead to pauses, reinterpretations, or follow-up questions that shift the tone of the exchange. Her interview style more broadly reflects a consistent performance approach rather than spontaneous unpredictability. Across dozens of recorded interviews and promotional appearances over the past decade, she has demonstrated a pattern of delivering responses in a calm, controlled tone while occasionally introducing unexpected subject shifts. These shifts are not random interruptions, but subtle deviations from expected conversational structure, such as responding to emotional or structured questions with understated humor or introducing unrelated observations that momentarily redirect attention. This technique often creates a visible contrast in group interviews. Hosts and co-guests, especially those accustomed to conventional promotional dialogue, may pause or recalibrate their questioning when the conversational flow diverges from expected patterns. In televised formats, these moments are often noticeable because talk shows rely on timing, cue-based transitions, and predictable response structures. When a guest operates outside that rhythm, even slightly, it forces the format itself to adjust in real time. Despite this, the tone of her responses typically remains calm and composed. Even when discussing abstract ideas, unusual hypotheticals, or spontaneous thoughts, she tends to maintain a steady delivery that avoids dramatic emphasis. This contributes to the ambiguity that audiences often interpret as unpredictability. The humor is not in exaggerated performance, but in the contrast between content and delivery. From a performance perspective, this aligns closely with improvisational training principles. In improv, one of the foundational rules is maintaining emotional neutrality while introducing unexpected information, allowing the audience and scene partners to determine the emotional weight of the moment. Plaza's background in improvisational comedy supports this approach, which helps explain why her interviews often feel structured yet unpredictable at the same time. Ultimately, what appears as derailment or disruption in interviews is more accurately a consistent communication style shaped by improv logic, deadpan delivery, and a preference for minimal explanation. It creates moments that feel spontaneous, but are grounded in a well-established comedic technique. Say less than expected, shift the angle slightly, and allow the silence or reaction to complete the joke. In several recorded interviews featuring Aubrey Plaza, there is a recurring pattern where structured promotional conversations gradually drift into unexpected comedic territory. This is especially visible in long-form talk show formats, where interviews typically last between 5 to 15 minutes and follow a predictable arc: introduction, project discussion, personal questions, and closing remarks. Plaza's appearances often follow that structure initially, but then deviate through sudden tonal shifts, deadpan remarks, or unconventional answers that redirect the flow of conversation. From a performance analysis perspective, this type of interaction is closely associated with deadpan disruption, a comedic approach where the performer maintains emotional neutrality while introducing offbeat or absurd content. In practical terms, this creates a contrast effect. The host follows a standard conversational rhythm, while the guest introduces material that does not match the expected emotional or logical progression. The result is visible hesitation, pauses, or follow-up questions that attempt to re-establish conversational structure. In some televised interviews, these moments manifest as brief silences lasting a few seconds longer than typical broadcast pacing norms. In television production, even a 2-3-second pause can feel significant because talk shows are edited for continuous flow. When such pauses occur, they often signal either confusion, reinterpretation, or comedic processing time from the host or audience. Plaza's delivery style, calm, minimal, and unsignaled, can amplify this effect because it leaves little immediate clarification for the listener to anchor onto. Despite this, these interactions are not chaotic in a literal sense. Instead, they reflect a controlled deviation from standard interview pacing. Communication studies often describe this as intentional incongruity, where humor emerges from the mismatch between expected conversational norms and actual responses. Rather than escalating emotionally, she tends to maintain a steady tone, which increases the contrast effect and makes even small deviations feel more pronounced. At large-scale public appearances such as award shows, premieres, and industry events, this effect becomes more noticeable due to the size and structure of the environment. Major award ceremonies, such as the Emmy Awards or Golden Globe Awards, are highly scripted productions with tightly timed segments, often scheduled down to the minute to accommodate live broadcasts. Within such environments, even small deviations in tone or delivery can stand out more sharply because the surrounding structure is highly controlled. When presenting or participating in these events, Plaza has been observed using subtle timing variations in scripted material, slight pauses, understated emphasis, or unexpected tonal shifts. In performance terms, this is not improvisation in the traditional sense, but rather micro-adjustments within scripted boundaries. These adjustments can create ambiguity for the audience, who may momentarily question whether a moment was rehearsed or spontaneous. Co-stars and presenters reacting in real time often rely on cues such as vocal tone, facial expression, and timing to maintain synchrony during live or semi-live segments. When those cues are intentionally understated or ambiguous, it can create brief synchronization gaps, moments where other participants adjust their rhythm to match the unexpected delivery style. This is especially noticeable in ensemble presentations, where multiple speakers share scripted transitions. However, rather than indicating loss of control, these moments are more accurately understood as performance contrast effects. In ensemble entertainment settings, contrast between delivery styles is often used to heighten audience engagement. A calm or restrained delivery in a high-energy environment can increase perceived unpredictability, even when the underlying structure remains intact. Overall, the perception of unpredictability in these settings comes less from randomness and more from a consistent performance approach, minimal emotional signaling, precise timing variation, and a preference for understated delivery within highly structured environments. In many recorded appearances by Aubrey Plaza, what audiences often describe as derailment is better understood through the lens of improvisational performance technique rather than literal unpredictability. Her comedic background in structured improv training emphasizes a principle commonly taught in institutions like the Upright Citizens Brigade: maintain emotional consistency while introducing unexpected or incongruent content. This creates what comedy theorists refer to as controlled disruption, where the humor arises from tension between expectation and delivery rather than from spontaneous chaos. In interview environments, typically designed around 3 to 10 structured questions within short broadcast segments, her responses frequently extend the emotional range of the conversation without altering its formal structure. Instead of following predictable promotional language, she often uses deadpan delivery or intentional tonal flattening, which can make even light or humorous statements feel unusually intense or ambiguous. Communication research shows that when emotional signaling is reduced in conversational speech, audiences tend to project meaning onto pauses and tone shifts, increasing the perception of unpredictability even when the content remains coherent. The idea of unexpected threats or surreal improvisations, often mentioned in fan commentary, is more accurately categorized as exaggerated comedic framing rather than literal behavior. In performance comedy, hyperbolic statements are a common device used to create contrast and shock value humor. When delivered in a calm, matter-of-fact tone, as Plaza often does, the effect is amplified because the emotional signal does not match the content. This mismatch is a recognized comedic mechanism known as incongruity theory, widely studied in humor psychology, where humor arises when expectations and reality diverge in controlled ways. At large-scale public events such as red carpet appearances, film premieres, and award ceremonies, the effect of this style becomes more visible due to the highly structured nature of these environments. Events like the Emmy Awards or Golden Globes operate on tightly scheduled live formats, where presenters and interviewers rely on predictable exchanges to maintain broadcast timing. In such settings, even small deviations in pacing or tone, such as extended pauses, unexpected phrasing, or understated responses, can stand out significantly because they contrast with the otherwise rehearsed environment. When interacting with co-stars or other celebrities during these events, the dynamic often reflects a combination of scripted promotion and spontaneous humor. Industry press events are typically coordinated with talking points and media strategies designed to maintain message consistency. However, when a participant introduces ambiguity or non-standard humor into that structure, it can temporarily disrupt the conversational rhythm. This does not indicate loss of control, but rather a shift in interaction style that forces others to adjust in real time. From a performance analysis standpoint, what appears as controlled chaos is more accurately a consistent application of restraint-based comedy. Plaza's delivery style relies heavily on minimizing overt emotional cues, which increases interpretive space for audiences and co-participants. In ensemble settings, this often results in contrasting reactions. Some participants respond with heightened expressiveness, while others adapt by matching her subdued tone, creating a layered dynamic that feels unpredictable to viewers. Across multiple documented appearances over the years, this pattern remains stable rather than random. The unpredictability is therefore not rooted in inconsistency, but in the repeated use of a specific performance strategy, understated delivery, deliberate pacing variation, and intentional ambiguity in tone. These elements combine to produce the perception of spontaneity, even within structured promotional and scripted environments. Even during award ceremonies and large-scale industry broadcasts featuring Aubrey Plaza, her presence is often discussed in terms of tonal contrast rather than literal unpredictability. Major award shows such as the Emmy Awards, Golden Globes, and Screen Actors Guild Awards operate under extremely structured live production systems, where acceptance speeches and presenting segments are typically pre-written, time-limited, often around 30-90 seconds per segment, and tightly coordinated with broadcast timing cues. Within this controlled environment, even small deviations in delivery, such as extended pauses, altered phrasing, or unexpected comedic emphasis, can become highly noticeable because they disrupt the expected rhythm of live television. In cases where performers deviate from scripted remarks, the production response is usually subtle rather than interventionist. Co-hosts or stage managers may adjust pacing through timing cues or light improvisation, but the goal is generally to maintain broadcast flow rather than correct content. When Plaza introduces humor or tonal shifts within these frameworks, it often creates what media analysts call live contrast moments, instances where the structure of the event remains intact, but the emotional tone temporarily shifts, making the segment stand out in post-event highlights and audience memory. From a performance perspective, what is often described as stepping outside the script aligns with established techniques in live presentation comedy, where speakers intentionally vary pacing or emphasis to create memorability. Communication research in broadcast media shows that audiences retain emotionally irregular or structurally unexpected moments at significantly higher rates than standard scripted delivery, which is one reason such moments frequently become widely circulated clips after the event. Across interviews and collaborative appearances, co-stars and hosts who have worked with her often describe a consistent pattern rather than randomness. Conversations that begin in a conventional promotional tone can shift into abstract humor or deadpan commentary, changing the emotional register of the interaction. In ensemble press environments, where multiple participants are often responding to rapid-fire questions, this kind of tonal shift can influence group dynamics, prompting others to adjust their pacing, humor level, or response style to maintain conversational balance. However, within performance analysis frameworks, this is not interpreted as instability, but as controlled boundary testing. In improvisational theory, experienced performers often explore the edges of conversational norms while maintaining awareness of structure and timing. This creates a sense of unpredictability for the audience while still preserving internal control within the performer's choices. The effectiveness of this approach depends heavily on timing precision and restraint, both of which are core elements of trained improv performance. What makes this style particularly noticeable in Plaza's case is the contrast between minimal emotional expression and high-impact content shifts. Rather than escalating energy outwardly, she often maintains a calm delivery while introducing unexpected tonal turns. This contrast increases cognitive load for viewers and co-participants, making moments feel more striking than they would under more expressive delivery styles. Ultimately, her public presence is best understood through performance mechanics rather than randomness. The combination of timing control, understated delivery, and deliberate tonal contrast produces moments that feel unpredictable but are structurally consistent with improvisation. El Principles, this is why her appearances are frequently described as memorable, not because they break structure entirely, but because they bend it just enough to feel unfamiliar while still remaining within a controlled performance framework. If you made it this far, then you already understand why Aubrey Plaza isn't just another Hollywood personality. She is a completely different experience in every room she enters. But this is only part of the story. There are even more moments, interviews, and award show incidents where things go even further off script in ways most people have never seen. So if you want more deep dives like this, where we break down personalities, viral moments, and behind-the-scenes behavior that most people miss, make sure to stay connected, because the next story goes even deeper than this one.